Hi, this is Levi Armandelli, and this is the commentary for the Killlock issue 2. Now, the cover here, just the nature of comics in general, solicitations go out so far in advance that you have to keep the covers vague. You know, by the time issue 1 of the series was released, the cover for issue 4 was already publicly known. So you really can have nothing spoilery. But I thought this cover was sort of the artisan in like a pool of blood or iron, and behind him fire, like, was both a metaphor for his personality and also hints at something that happens later in this issue. This first page here is the flashback of the laborer. We find out what he did, basically. Now, through the course of the series, we're going to see all 4 characters' inner monologue, their thoughts at some point. And with his, I wanted them to be very simple statements. You know, he wakes up, he drinks a little, he has a shitty commute, and he goes to his job. That's sort of the life of a labor class. This first shot where he wakes up and you see there's a tiny sliver of a window outside. That's sort of based on some of the hotel rooms I've stayed in Japan, where you see, you know, just a tiny sliver of the outside world. And I love Japan, but sometimes the hotel rooms, that is all you kind of get, is this little like window. But I like the metaphor that outside there's this kind of white metropolis and he lives in a sort of like dark room. You can see also that when he commutes to work, it's just other labor class. That's the only thing that's on this train, you know, and they're all sort of miserable, head down. That's just sort of their lot in life. The end of this page here, this model robot that sort of gives him shit for his job, sort of this, you know, manager robot, is a model that will show up later in the series. It's sort of a model that's kind of plagued him his whole life. And he finds out that due to kind of drinking to start his day, that he's caused this horrific accident. On page 2, I actually debated showing like the shuttle crash itself, where you would see this big, you know, shot of a destroyed ship and people running. And I thought like that really wasn't quite the right tone. I think it should just be the smoke and fire. It should be the aftermath of this tragedy. It shouldn't be sort of glorifying any sort of debris or whatever. So it's really just him living with what's happened. This is the sentencing chamber. I always ever wanted to see basically this one view of it where, you know, he's strapped down. He's looking off screen at the forgers who remain off screen throughout the entire series. This sort of judgmental body of their society looking down on him. I wanted it to be just the most unpleasant looking place. Like, it's bright. It's sort of a brace around your neck. Your head is locked into place. Just a truly unpleasant looking room. We jump into the present now, where he wakes up from kind of this nightmare, and we see that he's on the ship that we left last issue, where they're on their way to the party planet. And the kid and the Wraith are watching asteroids go by. And the Wraith basically tells a story about, like, he's kind of excited. Like, oh, yeah, we redirected an asteroid one time. We destroyed an entire colony of people. And then realizes, because he never really deals with kids, that that's not something you tell a child. Like, through the course of the series, all 3 of these sort of parental figures will interact with the kid at some point. And he sort of learns these life lessons one way or another, different levels of brutality from the 3 of them. The laborer kind of talks to the artisan here. The 2 of them have really disliked each other from the start. But I like this notion that the artisan is literally looking at how to sever his spine as he's talking to him, and even saying that that's what he could potentially be doing while he's doing it. When we turn the page here, this is our first shot of Arrakis, which is the party planet. Now, initially this was just a standard, you know, city planet, but I thought, you know, we've seen that so many times in science fiction. Let's find a way to make it weirder and more unusual. So the word Arrakis is another word for spine. And if you look here, this is actually the giant torso of a dead robot. You can sort of see a face there, and the entire city is built out of this robot's spine. So the sort of bones of this dead robot are now the city. So it's meant to just be a bit of kind of world building, suggest a history to this place before they got there. We got our first big reveal of them traveling through the crowd. Now you can see that not only are there other Killocks in the crowd, you know, this is a place for people who are sentenced to go. This is a very dangerous planet. There's people with Killocks. There's also people in cloaks to show that wearing a cloak is not unusual here. So that's why the artist and the Wraith can potentially blend in a little bit more. This later panel here too, I want to suggest, you know, not every place is perfectly designed from the start. You know, things arrive at different times. So you see a building being built behind the artisan, then you see a finished skyscraper beyond that. That even a planet like this, it's always constantly changing and moving. This next page here, where they're confronted by these drunken robots, I like the notion of the last issue was, scavengers that were armed, dangerously finding them. Now it's a bunch of basically drunken frat boy robots. I like the concept that, the kill lock can be really dangerous to be discovered, or it can just be a huge inconvenience. So these robots really aren't a threat, aside from the fact that they'll draw more attention. And the notion that a Wraith, this crusader of like these really crazy missions in deep space, would now be confronted by drunk frat boys on some birthday party trip, I thought was a pretty funny experience. So as they're confronted by that, we see the laborer take the kid into a lounge where they're searching for the Axial, who's a major character we're going to meet next issue. But the laborer sort of confronted here by his nemesis, which is a 2-drink minimum, where that will be the beginning of his sort of corruption on this mission, where initially his goals really are focused on finding the Axial, and now he's just a little too interested in this 2-drink minimum. When the Wraith talks to the sort of the frat boy characters here, I wanted to show that the Wraith doesn't always solve things just by punching them, that he realizes that these aren't characters worth killing. Like, we're not rather worth killing, but they're not characters who deserve to be killed. They're just curious and they're interested. So he has a sort of benevolent, peaceful side to him that he tries to just tell them he's on this important mission and for them to just let him do his job. I wanted to show that there's more to this character than just sort of killing. This scene with the laborer and the kid is like, it's meant to show that, when the laborer drinks, it's not just that he, falls down or causes accidents. It shifts his personality. Like, there are those people out there who drink where it's sort of, they become darker, they're still cognizant, but the things that they say are not what they would say when they're not under the influence. So he kind of calmly but coldly tells the kid, like, you're defective, you're an unfinished. The notion in this world is that if you're an unfinished robot, you would be given these tasks, these menial tasks to show that you can do it. And then eventually you'd be given another class. So the kid's body would be altered. His chip would be put into a labor class or another class later. And he just didn't get to that step. Basically, he was exiled before he even found out what he was going to become. So the laborer tells him that, which in a very kind of harsh way. But I like this notion here that the laborer tells him to, like, he kind of realized he went too far and tells the kid, like, don't ever try this, don't even have a sip of this. But the kid leaves and this laborer stays to show that the addiction is sort of won here. And the kid is now venturing into a very dangerous planet. These alleyways he walks through, there's a lot of also Tokyo influence here. This sort of weird face on a building, that's something I've seen in Tokyo myself, where you'll just go down an alleyway and inexplicably there'll be a giant sculpted face on a building with no explanation. Like, it's just a really fascinating kind of scenery. And this world like began as kind of like a Vegas party planet, but I wanted to eventually push it to be weirder. So you can see robots here. We're not quite sure what they're doing. This second to last panel, you see a robot walking who's basically wearing kind of skin or cloth on his back. I wanted an oddness to this world there. It's not just people partying. There's just all sorts of kind of ominous looking characters running around. This last face we see is further pushing the design of the robots. Like, I almost kind of this bat-like character, like pushing them away from traditional human faces. We go back to the Wraith and the frat boys. This is something that will go through the course of the series, this notion that the Wraiths have a different sort of reputation among different people. So for some people, the Wraith Legion is seen as this crusading kind of peaceful force that's a force for good in the universe. Like, these frat boys have each experienced like something from someone they knew where the Wraith Legion was a force for good. You'll see as the series goes on that the Wraith Legion is also viewed as a really horrendous force, that, it really depends on how you met them, what your perception of them is. When they take off, we see that there's a sort of a female hunter here who confronts the artisan and sees right through not just the cloaks, but also what they're hiding. And this also gets across the point that no matter how dangerous the Wraith is and how durable, all it takes is one shot to the artisan's face and the Wraith will be killed. So I like the idea of a complete stranger sort of putting the artisan in his place and just kind of letting him have it a little bit there. We see the kid show up after this, and he's got sort of the same childlike innocence of like, This robot stole one of his arms, and he believes the robot will be right back in a very kid-like way. This next page, we return to the laborer in the bar. We can see that this model that he's having a conversation with, this is the exact same model of robot that was criticizing him in page 1 at his job. This is another model from that like assistant class that sort of like just bothered him his entire life. Like always looked down on his kind. So he has a deep history with them. But then likewise, at the end of this page, we see another labor class where they have an instant bond because of everything they've gone through, where they're sort of the downtrodden class. And I put graffiti on this labor class, the idea that when he's doing his job, people are literally like writing on his arms and he's being graffitied on his actual body. The page after this, we see the Wraith and the kid go to confront the robot who is basically a metal merchant, someone who takes parts from other robots and sells them. And the Wraith goes to confront this character. I like this moment with the Wraith and the kid where the Wraith is sort of trying to empower the kid's sense of justice, where, you know, he can sense that the kid had this thing happen to him where someone took one of his arms and he longs for this sort of justice or to get even. And the Wraith wants to empower that. But it's also, parenting is not natural for a Wraith. So when the kid is like, can you throw this arm on top of a skyscraper, which is a very kid-like suggestion, I thought, the Wraith really likes that idea. He thinks it's an inspired way to treat it, where kind of like the asteroid at the beginning, the Wraith also uses the word inspired for that technique, that the Wraith's been out there kind of killing and destroying colonies for so long that if finding any new way to do violence, if it's creative, the Wraith responds to and finds it inspiring. When they leave here, the Wraith turns back to the metal merchant and suggests him finding a new path of redemption while he's still able to choose it, which is something that the Wraith will tell one of our main characters later in the series as well. This next page, we see the artisan confront the laborer and basically explain, like, you know, thanks to you, the kid's lost an arm. And they're growing sort of annoyance with one another. I wanted to get across that here also the artisan knows what the Wraith or what the laborer needs to heal, basically, or to kind of sober up. So as much as damage the artisan can do, he also knows what they need to get healthier. There's a bit of a time jump here, even though there's no captions, because I really wanted to avoid captions as much as possible. But you can see the laborers drank almost everything from the previous panel, suggests that they've been hanging out in this alley for a little bit. And then the Wraith and the artisan, or the Wraith and the kid, walk up. This next page here is our first glimpse of the Axial, who's a major character in the series, who arrives next issue. I really like this lettering by Tom Long, where the lettering is also kind of holographic, like the hologram is. I thought that's really cool. And a hint of the world of Hadrian, which is a world that the Wraith Legion destroyed a decade ago. This would be the first time the Wraith will actually go back to a planet that he destroyed. And, you know, usually when the Wraith Legion arrives somewhere, they never return to see what happened. So that's something he's confronted with the next issue. There was actually a deleted sequence here that for time reasons I decided to cut, but when they're deciding what to do about getting a new ship, I had this notion initially that the artisan, with his intelligence and, as he says, like his gambling aptitude, that he would go to a casino and he would just raise a ton of money. And then because they were kind of waiting out the heat that they were getting on themselves, they would spend a night in like a 5-star casino hotel. And I like the notion of the laborer and the Wraith, who have never seen such luxury in their lives, would have to stay in a real opulent sort of suite. I thought that was kind of funny, but it wasn't really necessary for the story. So I changed it, that the easier solution was just, you know, they just find someone that deserves to have like their ship stolen, and then the Wraith will go along with it, which is who's on the next page. This sort of casino owner that's parked this giant ship here and is now using it as a casino on this planet. This page also introduces a really important symbol, which is the Wraithius symbol, where it's this mark across the galaxy that says that basically you don't even believe what the Wraith believes. And more than that, that the Wraith is wrong, that what he believes in is not real. So it's really a symbol that kind of offends the Wraith and pisses him off. And this is the motivation he needs to sort of take out this casino owner. This is an important line that when the Wraith confronts him, it will be picked up much more in a follow-up series, which I have an idea to do, of what that symbol actually means. When the Wraith says, you know, you drape your house of poison in this, or your house of malady in a symbol of poison, you're ignorant of its true meaning. The Wraith knows what that symbol actually means, even though it's sort of trendy or people put it up to be edgy, but there's a lot more to it. So that's why he's so offended by it. I like the notion here that the casino owner's goons, they recognize the symbol of the Killlock, and they know if you just kill the smaller ones, you'll take out the Wraith. So the Wraith sort of protects all three smaller ones by just his arm. This is the first time we see that the Wraith has abilities that are beyond just punching, where he has these sort of gladiatorial, like, chain weapons that shoot out. I wanted it to be that, you know, the Wraith never uses lasers, nothing high tech. It's sort of medieval, like, brutal weaponry. So he's like chains and spikes and spears. That's sort of the weapon of a Wraith. The Wraith never picks up a gun. But, you know, these old sort of weapons are superior, sort of, to the, you know, laser fire in the right hands. This is a moment that I appreciated. I liked how this came across with the Artisan, where he just straight up lied to them before, where he told them, you know, the ship has anti-flame thrusters meant for takeoffs in big cities. And they just assume, because he's sort of the smartest of them all, the most intelligent, that that's accurate. And you find out he just straight up lied, that those don't even exist. So when he hits ignition, he sort of destroys this entire section of town and takes off. And this line from the laborer, like, we thought that city was going to be a threat to us. I like that concept, that when they first arrive on this planet, you think that they're going to be in danger. And they are a bit, but really they're the ones that have really caused damage in this issue. You know, that they really are this kind of threatening force. And when the Wraith sort of says to the Artisan, you know, there's innocent people burning down there, the Artisan points out correctly, he's like, well, you know, that was like the worst of the worst in that area. Like, if your Legion's job was punishing these people around the galaxy, like I just did your work for you. Like, I like that the Artisan, as kind of vile and brutal as he is, he makes some interesting points where, you know, his methods are really rough, but in a way he's kind of the most successful of the group in getting them toward their mission. In the end here, we see the kid, always optimistic and innocent, talking about that for no reason at all. He's got a good feeling about where the cure is. And this is our first shot of the world of the cure, this mysterious planet where this final splash page is just legions of dead bodies, all with the Killlock symbol. You see different classes here. You see labor class. You see the assistant class. You see some classes here that we're going to meet later in the series. But I like the contrast of this optimism from a kid over a clearly not good situation they're heading into. And that's the end of this issue. This is the cover for issue 3 now, which is the Wraith on the planet of Hadrian, where they're heading. This is a planet that his Legion destroyed before. So he's sort of sitting over these dead bodies, very kind of Pompeii bodies. And issue 3 is definitely about the Wraith coming to terms with past actions. Now, the pinups for this issue are by Peter Nguyen, who's a really successful artist from Marvel, DC Comics. We're San Diego Comic-Con buddies every year. We sit next to each other. I really love the colors here. I think really like vibrant, dynamic. I really like this piece a lot. The next pinup is by my friend Eddie Nunez, who we're Wildstorm family. We've known each other since 2008. We worked for Jim Lee, and I love Eddie's style. He's a really phenomenal artist and a great guy. And I think the labor is like, the proportions are like just perfect here. I really like this a lot. This next pinup is by Megan Crisp, who's another phenomenal artist. We went to grad school together. I've known her lived in San Francisco since 2004. Like, Megan's a really fantastic artist. She does a lot of illustration, video game work in the industry. This piece is fantastic. I like how the kid is separated from the others due to the silhouettes. I think it's genius that the Killlock symbol kind of fits the body of the Wraith, like the stance. That's really awesome. Like, just beautiful lighting. And then finally, Brendan Cahill, who's another fellow Transformers artist of mine. I love this too. Like, great use of the symbol and the colors. Just really fantastic. This is one of the earliest pinups I saw. Really love this work by Brendan. And then this final shot is one I did, actually. This was one of the earliest images I did for the book, where I debated at some point if this should be a cover of, you know, the series or should be a pinup. But I liked this notion of the Wraith standing over a bunch of dead bodies and holding a bird, where it shows both the brutality of him, but also the heart. And it didn't quite fit a cover for me because I felt like it's sort of related to issue 1, but it's also something else. So I thought it was just best to run it as a pinup here. But that is the end of issue 2, and thank you. I'll see you for issue 3.